Ni quang talong pa, ne Sheilah Nicholas yan pahan ma chiu kyang ne piu Hopi sino ni ka obi ko chahon ma na yan Hopi ma chiu a ne kalwang ne singopang sino. Good morning. My English name is Sheilah Nicholas, and I'm also from the Hopi community in northern Arizona in the United States. So I am introducing myself also to you in my language and my Hopi identity, which is that my name is translates into White Bear Girl. I'm from the village of Sangopavi, my maternal village, and I am from the Sun Forehead clan. My work with language started with understanding that and realizing that I had shifted in my own language thinking. I was born into the language, but when I went to school, I shifted to English. And at 8 years old, I quit speaking my language. And for most of my adult life, I spoke only English. And then later found out that I could no longer think in the language. Therefore, I couldn't speak, but I could understand. This was very hard to realize. It was a rude awakening. It was an awakening that I had while I was speaking to my mother. My mother was extremely surprised that I could no longer speak in the language. And she said to me, when you were a child, you were fully Hopi in our language. I understood her, and I felt that that was very much a really hard thing for me to hear, because I thought because I can't speak my language anymore, I no longer had a Hopi identity. It took me my dissertation research to realize that I took my mother's comment literally, and that's not really what she meant. What she meant was that when I was a child, I was fully proficient in speaking my language. Very different. It really had, she wasn't talking about my identity. She was talking about a very surprise reaction to realizing that I couldn't speak anymore. And this is despite the fact that she always spoke to me in Hopi, but I always answered in English. And so the idea and understanding that I couldn't think and therefore couldn't speak in Hopi was something that neither one of us even realized until she made that comment. But since then, that whole experience took me to language to understand why this happened. I could understand it, especially because I was raised out of my community, outside of my community from 8 years old. But when I went back to help my mentor do some work on language, the students in the classroom of Hopi were going to a class getting instruction in the language in order to speak, and I could not understand that because they were born and raised in our community, took part in the traditions, all of the way of living in the Hopi community, but they weren't speaking the language. And so that was a really surprise awakening also to me. Since then, I have been understanding that much better in terms of my own research, how that has made me understand that despite that kind of awakening, much of the language still remains very vital within the songs, the ceremonies, and the traditions and practices of our community. Thus, we need to look at those as strongholds where the language is, but also help our young people to understand the messages inherent in all of those practices and forms of language. So since then, I have been working with fluent speakers, community members who are, at the time I was starting to work, were at least 50 years or older, but worked in the schools that are on our community. They were the ones who were teaching language and culture to the young people. However, because they were fluent speakers and had acquired the language in a natural way, they had not been trained to teach the language. And this made it very difficult for them to understand how to gift our young people with the language in a more effective and appropriate way that the young people could accept and engage with. That said, I've been working a lot in terms of trying to understand how you do teaching a language. And I got very involved in the approach called the oral immersion method. The reason being that these language adult speakers were speakers of the language, and they also lived the curriculum, which is the Hopi way of life. They were able to convey everything about the way they were brought up as Hopi people and through the language. It's just that the approach was not something that they were familiar with in terms of a formal sense of teaching in classrooms and schools. That was very difficult for them. But many, many years we've been working at this, and maybe another rude awakening is that oftentimes school is not the best place to learn the language. It is really in the community and in the home and with family that happens, and these are practices that we need to go back to and recognize and to resurface these practices, because the common practice today in terms of language in our community is it lives in the voices of the adult speakers. But when they look to the young people, they turn to English. And so the intergenerational form of interaction and communication is through a foreign language of English. So we have to understand that one of the best ways and the most natural ways is for us to enjoy having a relationship with our language and to just speak it, because that is the best kind of input, is just to hear it in its natural spaces. So that said, that's my work. It continues to be my work, but I'm primarily doing this kind of work with other tribal communities in the United States. One of the sad and tragic things that oftentimes our own community members don't look to us to do this work with our own people. There are a lot of behaviors and attitudes that we have succumbed to in terms of colonization. So oftentimes it's harder to work within your community and educate and help and promote and advance these kinds of approaches. But other tribal communities are willing to listen to that and be educated and be informed. So I spend most of my work doing this kind of teaching and preparation with language speakers in other communities. That's the kind of work I do right now. In terms of the importance of the language, I have often been hearing so much our community people telling others who don't speak the language, you need to learn the language. And the question is, how do you get community members to understand what that really means when they are in a community where English is spoken and not our community language? So I think one of the key things here is to understand what the role of language was. And I've been thinking about that very much. And it means that you have an experience with the language, through the language, about your community's positioning as a people in a particular place and landscape. So it is very, very important to understand that relationship and this idea of stewardship, because that's the whole purpose of our people, to have become a people rather in a particular place, and to understand that responsibility to that place. And those responsibilities are conveyed through the language. And it's not just the speaking of the language, but it's all the practices, the ceremonies, and the traditional practices of subsistence that we use in order to convey those messages. So you can take part in all of those practices through English, but you don't get the full experience of understanding why, the deeper meaning of why. So the importance of the language is something that is very challenging for us to think about, but it is significant, and in order to continue, and most importantly, I think I have learned that within those words is this idea of the will to survive, to have a fierce willpower to overcome any kinds of, atrocities, experiences that we are subjected to in terms of interaction between peoples and from outside world. But it's our language that keeps us rooted so that we know the right path to take and to stay on that path for a sense of groundedness, rootedness, as well as well-being. So those are very abstract ways of thinking about the importance, but I spent a lifetime, most of my adult life, reclaiming, relearning my language, relearning to speak it. And I can say from that experience, while I think about the purpose of why did I shift in my language and had such a difficult time being able to speak the language, there was a purpose to that. And I truly feel that that makes me sort of a medium in terms of saying to others why it is important. I lost it for a while, but I really didn't leave it anywhere. It actually just went deep inside of me. So I have been spending most of my life now resurfacing that from inside and enjoying it and having a good relationship with the language. So I think one of the things is that we have to look at our language as not a thing, but actually a living, breathing part of who we are, and that in that kind of understanding of language, you have to spend time with it. You have to use it. You have to enjoy it. You have to make it an important part of your everyday thoughts because it's very easy that it goes back inside, and it is even harder to bring it back up when you do that. So I would express to you that you think about your language and love it. Think about using it because you're speaking to your ancestors. Think about it because it is expressing a relationship not only in an emotional way, but also a spiritual way with all of what you are and where you come from. So I wish you well, and I hope my words will help you understand that your language is a part of you, but you don't want to get disconnected from it. You need to bring it back to yourself. This message is really specifically to the Indigenous peoples of Nepal and to the Tamang. I have met someone who is working very hard from a deep passion and dedication. Nabrang, who has been doing this work today and for a while, and I've met him just recently, and understand that passion and that commitment. So I want to send a message on his behalf from me that the work that he is doing is so important and so critical that I hope you will contribute and support and advance the work that he is doing. This is very difficult work. It takes a lot of patience. It wishes for a lot of support, and if we all think about this in a unified and collective way to help each other, and be very grateful that sometimes it takes just one person to lead us in the right direction together so that we can do this work together in a united way. It takes a community. The language is a language of the community, and that's what it will take to keep it alive and thriving. I hope you will definitely, work with him to help him preserve the language in all of the ways that he's working at it. That's Willie.